Go ahead and take a seat as we continue our time together this morning. If you have not met, my name is Austin. My wife Allie and I are the lead pastors here at Tekoa Church. And I'm excited to celebrate. Today, we've got some fun things happening after service. We've got root beer floats for everybody, and if you don't like that for some reason or can't eat that, got some popsicles as well if that's more your jam, or just meet somebody. But now you know somebody else other than who you came with. So when we go out there, you can continue the conversation. Maybe I cut you off, and you're like, "But I really wanted to share what I like to eat." If you're like me, I get started talking about food, and I can keep talking. I love good food. But this morning we are going to talk about a father from the Bible, but it's not just for the guys in the room. It's not just for the dads in the room. There's something for all of us to learn from this father. And unfortunately, as I was preparing this week, and I was thinking about, okay, this is a great week to look at a dad from the Bible. And I started thinking through, okay, who are the dads in the Bible? What story might the Holy Spirit be leading me to preach on? And I was realizing the pages of the Bible are filled mostly, there's some great women in there too, but mostly with guys. Most of the prophets are men. Most of the leaders are men. So many men. There's not a ton of great fathers that are in the pages of the Bible. There's a few, and often we don't know. Like, they could have been great fathers. We don't necessarily know. But it also just reminded me of, this is life. The Bible is filled with real people, not made-up people. And for history, right, there's some great fathers, but there's often been some fathers that aren't the best. And in our faith, the greatest thing for us is that no matter what our earthly father was like, no matter what our current situation is like, we have a Father in heaven who loves us deeply and who is a good father and is caring for us and loving for us and is so, so good for us. So as we're looking this morning at the fathers in the Bible, did we switch the lights? I don't know if we did, but if not, let's do that. All right, where are we at this morning? What am I talking about? I get to talk to us this morning about Zebedee from the Bible. And you're like, the reason I'm excited, I just like his name. Like, it's a cool name. Like, why don't we have any little Zebedees running around? Nobody names their kids that. Maybe I'm just excited because I was double A, Austin Anderson. I'm always at the front of the line or the second in line. I'm like, to be last. Zebedee gets to be last in line. But he was a father in the Bible, and honestly, we don't even read that much about him. But he made an impact in history, not just in his own life, not just in his family, not just in his business. My message title this morning is called Decades, Not Days. Decades, Not Days. And I want to encourage you to think through, we can put that up there, Decades, Not Days. I want to encourage you to think through, what is the impact that you can have in your life? Not just your whole life, right? Not just thinking of, okay, if I live 60, 80, 100 years, that many decades, but in 5 years or 10 years, what is the impact that you can have? What are the habits that you have, the routines you have that can make a difference in over time, not just in a moment? Because we're going to read about a moment this morning, but I think the reason that even Zebedee's kids could make the right decision in the moment was because of all the years that he had with them leading up to the moment, that they were prepared for that part in time when Jesus showed up in their life for them to respond. One of the quotes that has always meant a lot to me, I looked it up this week. It says, most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, and they underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. And we often just live constantly discouraged by the fact that we didn't do very much in this year like we thought we could. But in a decade, we don't realize what God could do through us, what we could accomplish in our families, what kind of impact we can make. I looked it up this week, and it's not a famous preacher quote. It's a Bill Gates quote. And he's the one that said that. But I actually thought it was appropriate because we're going to look at a businessman this morning from the Bible. Zebedee was a businessman. So we're going to look at what he had to say, what happened in his story. Mark chapter 1. So Jesus, passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little further, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. We hear a lot about James and John and the impact that they made. But that was only possible because of the family that, not only possible, but mostly happened because of the family that they grew up in. Their father doesn't take center stage in the pages, but I think their father played an important part in their life. The reason his kids were able to make such an impact and be leaders in the church and make a difference in their country was the fact that their father had prepared them and made an impact over them. Not just in a moment, but over the decades of their life, they were prepared and ready. Your legacy is so much more important than what happens with your kids, which you can't fully control. Or maybe you're not a father and you're sitting here today. What you can do as you disciple somebody in the church, as you make an impact where you live, as you serve, the impact that you have with your life and those around you, what you can do in that over a longer period of time. So many times we get discouraged of, it didn't happen. And we're like, God's like, it's been a month. I know I do miracles, but it's only been a month. The impact you can have over a decade is so much greater than what you think you can do in the short term. I was having coffee this week with Hermie, who's one of the overseers on our board, and he was talking to me about his son, and there was just so much joy in him and so much pride as he got to talk about his son, who just this last month made the decision to get baptized. And he said, all on his own, not because his mom or I wanted him to, because he said, I want to follow Jesus for the rest of my life, and I want to declare that through baptism. And there was so much pride in him. And we love talking about traveling and outdoors and other things when we get to get together. But the joy that he had, the pride that he had talking about his son, and that doesn't come from just, a day with his son. That comes from him and his wife over years making a difference and setting an example for his son. And so the first thing I want to tell us this morning is teach your kids what matters. Teach your kids what matters. Or the people that you're discipling, or whoever you have influence with in your life, what matters most, right? Like for us, our faith matters more than anything. That's why he was so excited of my son, his faith. This is what matters. When I get to talk about our church, when I get together, even with other pastors, I don't talk about how amazing our team is, even though they are. I don't talk about the baptisms that we have had, even though I get so much joy from that. One of the primary things I get to share about and that matters to me, and it matters to others too, other pastors too, but it matters so much to me. I constantly get to share about how much my kids love Sundays and love church and are learning to love God. And my kids get here at 7:30 in the morning. They don't leave until like 1 p.m., and then they usually go to the park and play with some other families. And the fact, as a father, the fact that they love coming, like when is Sunday, Dad? When is church? I want to be here. Because I love that place. That, I'm sorry, but more than your kids, more than you, that's what I care about, that my kids like coming to church. Your kids, a second, right? And if my kids like it, your kids probably like it. But that's what matters to me, that they love and are learning to love God, and they're learning to love what matters most to me is my faith in Jesus. That's what matters. Matter of fact, another pastor came here, and he was watching just a Sunday morning having. He's like, we have a gathering of pastors in the South Bay area, and he's like, can you come next week? We're together. Can you just talk for a couple minutes to them about like what do you do with your kids that they love, like they're helping and they love church? Just come share. And I'm like, I would love to, because this is what's so important, that our families learn what's most important. And this is what I want to encourage you. Sports come and all these things come in life, right? School comes, valuable things. But what is most important, what's a priority for us, is our faith. And we see that in our story today in verse 20. And immediately he called to them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. These guys just happened. Jesus is like, come follow me. And they're like, okay, let's go. These guys, I don't think they hated their life. I don't think they were like quiet quitting for years. And then Jesus came along and they're like, yes, we've been waiting to just get out of the boat. And we've been stuck with our Father for so long. See, being a fisherman in Galilee was not a bad job. Having a business, not just being one of the hired servants of a fisherman, not just being a worker, they were actually like heirs to the business empire that their father Zebedee had. Like, it was a good business. And their father taught them what mattered, taught them about faith and God. And I think this happened over decades. And what they were doing wasn't bad, but they had the opportunity. God said, Jesus gave them an opportunity for more. The Sea of Galilee is an amazing place. Matter of fact, I think if I was them, I would have been hesitant to go with Jesus. Because I've been all over Israel. I got to go about 15 years ago and spend 6 weeks there. And I traveled with two of my friends, and at the end of our trip, we got to go, like, where else do we want to go? We've got another 3 days. Where are we going to go? We all said unanimously, like, we're going back to the Sea of Galilee. There's so much desert there. It's a beautiful country, but the Sea of Galilee is a special place. It's peaceful. It's beautiful. There's water, unlike the rest of the desert where water is hard to come by. It's an amazing place. And immediately they follow Jesus and they get out of the boat. And I know they didn't hate their jobs because when Jesus was crucified, they went back home to go fishing. Right? They're like, we got to process what just happened. They said, we're going to go home and we're going to go fishing. Like, we're going to go get in the boat again, and we're going to cast the nets again, and we're just going to go back to this because this is what we know. And they must have liked it because they could have done anything, and they went back to go fishing. They were hardworking. They said, let's go back fishing. And so they weren't escaping their lives. Zebedee and their mom as well, Salome, we'll talk about her in a second. Don't worry, we're not going to forget her. And they taught their kids what is important. And their father sent them on their way. Their mother became a faithful disciple of Jesus as well. She was one of the ones that took spices to the tomb after Jesus was crucified. She was faithful, more faithful than actually maybe her sons in some ways. But that kind of teaching of their kids happens over decades, not just in days. And see, they had one shot in this moment where Jesus said, come follow me. And they didn't miss the opportunity because they had been prepared over the years to know what is most important in life. Is it the family business? It's going well. We've got other people working for us. Like, this is going well. No, they knew that I'm going to go with Jesus because what God has for me and that calling is so much more. And they didn't miss their shot. They didn't hesitate. They just immediately followed Jesus. My second point this morning is this: bring God into your work. Bring God into your work. I read about the industry of fishing this week, and for most of us, right, you don't work in ministry like I do, and I haven't always worked in ministry either. I want to encourage you, bring God into your work. I think Zebedee did this. I think the family did this, and I read about their industry of fishing this week back in the first century, and it was a thriving industry. There was at least 16 busy ports on this lake. We think about a lake and we're like, oh, okay, you can see the other side. I've been there. You can't see the other side. It's a big lake. There were 16 ports. There was several towns. There were so many fishing boats that we read that Josephus was actually able to confiscate in a war 230 of these boats. So there was at least that many there. There was a lot. And the catch was not just for the local villages, what a boat might have looked like for them. It was just smaller than a school bus. If you're thinking about what size boat did they have on this lake, that they didn't just catch and sell it in the town to their neighbors. They exported their fish around the Middle East and the world. The fish from Galilee went to Alexandria in Egypt. It went into Syria. It went all around because it was one of the primary parts of the diet in the Greco-Roman world. And so they weren't just competing with, their neighbor. They were competing on the larger world market and the business trade there. I think they were probably pretty good businessmen. And Zebedee was raising them to be that, and we see that even as James and John follow Jesus, and as they follow him, I think seems like they took their business knowledge even with them and trying to work really hard and see God's kingdom come through them. And I think Zebedee took days and years teaching his sons to fish, teaching his sons what was most important, their faith in God. And then the moment comes, and I love this, it's so clear, they left their father in the boat. They didn't even tell Jesus, like, hey, can we help him finish up? We'll catch up with you, like, at the end of the day. Like, they left him in the boat. Now, he did have some workers that they had hired that were helping out there in the boat, but they left him in the boat. And I think what I don't want us to miss in that, though, is Zebedee didn't say, hey, can I come with you? He didn't say, like, hey, Jesus, don't take my sons. I need them for the business. He didn't say, oh, hey, I want to be a part of the ministry. I think Zebedee knew that, hey, God's calling them to something else greater in ministry. My calling is here in the boat, in my business, and that's not bad. Some of you, I want to encourage you, what you do for work, what you do for your job, what you do is not bad, and God has a calling for you in that place. And I think Zebedee knew that this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm going to bring God into it, and I'm going to serve God and worship God in all that I do, even in the marketplace, even in the workplace. We don't live surrounded, by Jesus followers like they did. Your opportunity to bring God's kingdom is even greater into your work, is even greater than Zebedee had and these other fishermen had. Yes, it's the obvious if you get to share about Jesus to your coworkers, but it's also about the fact that you get to bring God's kingdom into that place. You get to bring, maybe a week like this, you get to bring the fact that, you know what, there's so much going on in the world. Maybe you're like, there's stuff going on in my family right now. Maybe your coworkers are like, there's stuff going on, I'm anxious, I'm worried. You get to come into that place and be a non-anxious person in the middle of that. Of, hey, it's not that I don't feel that, but I know that because I trust God that I have some peace. I want to bring some of that peace into this place. I want to bring some of God's kingdom into this place with me. You have the opportunity for your work to be meaningful and make an impact as you bring God's kingdom there. You have an opportunity as everybody's sitting around, right, gossiping, to make a difference of, hey, I don't want to talk about my coworkers that way. I want to bring some of what God has. There's a better way for us to do this. We also learn about him from his wife, and then we also see in Luke chapter 8 that there's a bunch of women that are following Jesus, and it says that they provided for the ministry of Jesus out of their means. And scholars think that Salome, who was one of the women that followed Jesus, was one of these women, and that actually Zebedee got to help financially provide for his wife and his kids and the ministry of Jesus because he kept working. Because of what he did in that fishing boat, he got to make an impact through the work of Jesus and his sons and his wife by financially providing for the ministry that happened. Should he have said, Jesus, I want to come too? I mean, he could have asked, right? That wouldn't have been bad. But I also think maybe he knew that this is my place, and it's not a bad place to be. This is my calling, and I get to serve God out of this fishing boat day in, day out, right? If everybody in church, everybody here stopped working to go into full-time ministry, right? Obviously, we'd have the financial issue of, well, if nobody's funding the ministry, that's going to be really challenging. But we also would miss the opportunity that all of you have to make an impact. I've said this before, but you have an opportunity, you have an in to go into places to bring God's kingdom that I will never have access to. Because you get to bring him into your workplace or with your clients or wherever it might be, you have access that I will never have access to. And Zebedee got to provide also financially for his wife, his sons, for Jesus, all that this was happening. The New York Times had an article recently talking about, they called it the race to the bottom. And they were saying, man, all across businesses for decades now, but all across businesses, it's this idea, and it's just been getting worse and worse and worse, of how can I deliver the least valuable product for the least amount of money so that we can still make money? How can we do the least possible for our customers and still make money? Like, that's the goal. And they chronicled this man who was actually a Christian, who was in the housing industry, which has been even more and more and more. I see some videos online of what's happening in the housing industry of like, here's the law, we're going to do the minimum unless somebody catches us, and we're forced to do more because we can make more money that way, right? And this guy says, and there's other good builders out there, but this guy's like, I'm trying to do things differently. I'm not the cheapest in the market, but I treat my employees well. I treat my customers well. And I'm trying to deliver something, and the reason I do that is because God has called me to live that way. Because as Christians, we should represent ourselves well, because as Christians, we care about those around us. And it doesn't mean he's making great money. It doesn't mean he's not making money, but he's also doing so with integrity as he does his business. When I was working in sales, I'm not there yet. When I was working in sales, even like I so many of my coworkers were all about, I want to make as much money as possible, but how can I do the least possible and get out of here and get out of this place? And I said, I don't want to be that way. I want to do it differently, because I feel like as a follower of Jesus, I need to do it differently. And so, yes, I try to get out of there as soon as possible, because, who doesn't like to go home? But I also said, how can I do this with integrity? How can I provide for my customers? I know that we are one of the most expensive products in this market that we are in. But I also know we're one of the best products in the market that we're in. How can I take care of my customers as good as possible and care for them? Still selling to them. Matter of fact, I became the best salesman in the entire country in my company by caring for my customers, by doing so with Christian values and living with the fruit of the Holy Spirit. And out of that, right, God worked. And so how can you bring, it can be challenging, but how do you bring God into your workplace? That is part of your calling, whatever you do for work. Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom as you parent your kids. Maybe you're a stay-at-home dad. There's some of those too, right? Whatever your calling is in life, how do you bring God into that? Because God wants to be a part of it, and he wants to give you a purpose in that. Third thing I want to share this morning is this: throw off everything that hinders. Throw off everything that hinders. This is how, in the moment, you're ready. When Jesus shows up, when God shows up, you've thrown off everything that hinders. Your decisions have a compounding effect. And when you make your decisions, especially with your family, those decisions over time, over decades, compound in things. Hebrews says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. I heard the story of a runner. His name is Arlen, and his dad asked him, hey, why don't you take your phone on your runs with you? And most of us would probably be like, that seems, I run sometimes, not as much as I should, but I do run sometimes. And let me take this with me, because I want some music as I go running. I want to know, what is my pace? How much further do I have to go until I get to stop, right? This is a very helpful tool for me as I go running. And he is an ultra-distance runner. And he simply said, Dad, it's extra weight. I don't want that weight with me as I go running. And his dad was like, well, how much weight? Any way we could figure that out? And he thought, how in the world are we going to share with people how much this matters? Because it's like, he runs 100-mile races. Like most people, like that's not even walking distance, that's driving distance for most people. How do we communicate to them what this is like? And so he looks it up, and he gets some data, and he says, I took 58,000 steps in that race. And every time I take a step, that phone would be lifted and put down. And so he did some calculations and figured out that over the course of that race, it was 70,000 pounds of weight that he would have had to lift just by the few ounces of that phone. And we're like, oh, that's cool. But listen to the end of his story. The race that he ran, he got onto the podium for. He got onto the podium for the end of that race by 17 seconds. And I don't know if that 70,000 pounds would have been 17 seconds, but it very well might have been 17 seconds of difference that it made. That podium got him a professional career in running and athletics. He could have missed that podium by those 17 seconds. He might have missed that podium by this few little bit of weight that he was carrying with him. And I think in our walk of God, and even as Hebrews says, these things that we might make an excuse for of, it's not that much weight. Like, why not? It helps me sometimes, right? Those things can make an impact when it really matters. And they can make a difference for us making it or not. They can make an impact in those that we care about, maybe our kids, maybe our spouse, maybe our family, when the opportunity comes. If we have not thrown off the weight that Satan wants to keep us from fulfilling God's promise in our lives, it can hinder us, it can hold us back. Remove the things that hinder you from your goal and your purpose in life, so that just like these two, that when Jesus came, not knocking, but walking by and invited them, they said, I'm ready to go. Nothing. Create habits that build your faith, make decisions, right, to like, I'm going to prioritize being at church and contributing to the mission. Decide that when you are alone and only God knows what you are doing in that moment, decide that I'm going to honor God in that place, so that when the important things happen, that there is nothing that will hinder you from living out the calling that God has for you and the way that you want to live. Your reps over decades with God, with your spouse, with your family, those reps over decades make a difference over the course of your lifetime. Which leads right into the last thing I want to say is greatness is many small decisions. It's many small decisions. And greatness is often just following Jesus and trusting Him for the rest. It's following Jesus and trusting Him for the rest. I've been fishing a handful of times in my life. If I had to, I could take my daughters out fishing and like maybe we could catch a few little tiny fish. I know the basics of what you're supposed to do. I don't have the equipment, right? Like this is the kind of fishing pole that I have right here. As a father, if some of you have done this, right? This is how I know how to fish with my kids. This is what I got. But I've been fishing twice with professional guides or people that were, right? That I got the opportunity to go out with. And they took me. And those guys have trained for years. Time and time again. They know the river or the lake that they're fishing on. They know that this time of year I should go here. Oh, it's colder today. We need to go over here. Oh, this is the kind of this is the weather, so we should use this bait right now. That this is how deep I need. They know all those things, right? I barely know even what those things are. They know the details because of the time that they have put in day after day out there. Some of them just do it as a hobby. Some of them do it as a job. I'm not a great fisherman, but they are. Did I say to the guide, like, this is what I got. Let me use this. This is mine. No, I used what they had that was so much better than what I had. Obviously, I used their equipment. I used their expertise. Our job is not to try to do it all on our own with the equipment that we have. Our job is to follow Jesus. James and John did not say, as Jesus came by the boat, but we've not trained for this. I don't know how to make fishers of men, Jesus. I can't do that. I can catch fish out of the water, but that does not translate. I know you use that metaphor for me, Jesus, but people are not the same as fish. I don't know if you've ever noticed, Jesus. It doesn't work that way. No. They followed Jesus, and then Jesus took care of the rest. Our job is to follow Him, and then He will take care of the rest. Maybe you don't know. You're like, I don't know how to parent. I don't know how to be a good spouse. I don't know how to bring Jesus into my job, Pastor. That sounds crazy. You don't know the people I work with, the conversations that go on. There's no way I could do that. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to invite Jesus and say, hey, I'm going with you, Jesus. Wherever you're calling me to go, I'm going to go. Whatever you're calling me to do, I'm going to do. You follow Jesus and you will be great. One small decision at a time, over decades, he will make a difference. Zebedee taught his sons to work hard and to be diligent, what it means to be a successful businessman. He taught them about being a father and a husband, and he clearly taught them what it means to follow God, because when Jesus showed up, the sons respond immediately with a, yes, Jesus, let's go. And what do? They learn from Jesus over years. I want to reach somebody in days and then just have them get it. Sometimes I'm like, God, why hasn't it happened yet? And I think Jesus sometimes says, what do you mean, why hasn't it happened yet? Nothing. It's been days. It's been months. It's been weeks. What are you expecting to happen in that amount of time? I mean, it took Jesus years to make disciples. I don't know about you, but I'm not as good as him. It took him that time. And if we stop looking at, hey, what does God do? Oh, I tried to bring God into my workplace. I tried that one time and it didn't go well. And Jesus is like, yeah, you tried one time. I'm not asking you to do it once. I'm asking you to do it over years and see what I could do over that timeline. See what I could do over that. Yeah, everybody looked at me a little bit crazy when I talked about the root beer floats I had at church on Sunday and how great they were. That's okay. Some of them paid attention. They didn't say anything out loud, but they paid attention. And over decades, the impact that you could have. There are people that are in this room right now. There are people in this church right now that are here because one of their coworkers said something at work and made an eternal impact in their life. What you can do over decades make a difference. And Jesus doesn't need you to have it all figured out. Jesus just needs you to say yes as he invites you to follow after him and bring him in. In Matthew 28, he says, go make disciples of all the nations. And unlike the path of the rabbis, this is for all of us, we are all called to go make disciples of the nations. And unlike most rabbis, the fishermen are not required to do anything before they become disciples. They don't need to know certain things about the Torah, the Old Testament, and the law. They don't need to examine theology. What they need to learn to do is just follow Jesus when he says, follow me. That's all you need to do too. Follow Jesus when he says, follow me. Band, you can come back up here. In Mark chapter 10, there's another man that's healed, and Jesus says to him, go on your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovered his sight, he was blind, and he followed Jesus on the way. Immediately he followed Jesus. For Mark, who wrote this gospel, right, the act of following Jesus is a risk of faith, and it's just an act of saying, I'm going to go. I'm just going to follow. I don't have anything to offer right now, but I'm just going to go, and Jesus will take care of the rest. The call of the disciples to become fishers of men, it's one decision at a time, a call to follow Jesus as he invites you to follow after him. They who were successful businessmen are called to go into a new calling, a new business, to use that knowledge. Their father Zebedee was called to stay in what he was doing in his lane so that he could support his kids and his wife and those that worked for him, right? We all know that if we've ever had a boss, that being a good boss is, man, that's a calling right there in itself that's worthy, because we've all had bad ones, and I don't want to work for that kind of person, right? But if we could be a good boss bringing Jesus into our workplace, the impact that we can have, even in a company that doesn't have Christian values, we can bring God into it, and the impact we can have in people's lives and families' lives matters. But it's one decision at a time over decades, not just days. This week I had so many small decisions, and in those small things it's a matter of, do I follow God more closely or not? What kind of father do I be or not? What do I get to teach my kids? Riley came up to me a little over a week ago, and I was sitting in my chair, and I was trying to remember. I'm pretty sure I was reading my Bible. We're just going to say I was reading my Bible. And as I was reading my Bible, she came up to me and said, Daddy, I think she wanted me to play a game with her. It was play a game, read a book. And honestly, I feel bad saying this, but I didn't really want to. It's like, I'm comfortable right now. I'm doing something. Don't you know? I'm reading my Bible right now. Like, this is important. Like, I'm a little ashamed to admit that, and I was like, don't you know tonight I'm going to take you and your sister on a date? Like, I'm taking you out. You're just daddy time tonight. I said, she wants to be with me right now. What do I tell my daughter? I said, okay. In my head, I'm thinking all these things, but outwardly, I just say, yeah, Riley, I would love to. I would love to. You know what? What I'm doing right now, it can wait. Sometimes it can't, but right now I know it can, so it's going to wait. And I don't remember what we did. I don't think she remembers what we did. Right? I think they remember that night we went out to In-N-Out and got burgers and we had fun and it was great. I don't think that she remembers that moment. But I do know that yesterday I was sitting in a chair again for Father's Day and I got to relax for a minute. That's what I wanted to do. And Riley comes up to me, 2 books in hands. Daddy, will you read to me right now? And I, with a smile on my face, said, I would love to, because I've been teaching her that when I come up to Dad and I ask him something that he can say yes to, not just for some chocolate or some candy, right? He says yes to me. And I'm teaching her even what the truth about what her Heavenly Father says to her as she sees him through me. Decades, not days. The decisions we make with our spouses, with our kids, in our workplaces, invite Jesus into those places. I guarantee you, what matters in a decade is not going to be the title you have at work. It's not going to be what you did on Friday night. It's going to be the impact you made with your life. The impact you made with your life. And you can't do much, but Jesus can do a lot through you. He can do a lot through you. So this is me calling you like Jesus called the disciples, saying, will you become fishers of men and women? Will you become a part of the ministry maybe here at Tekoa? Will you become a part of the ministry that God has for you in your home? Will you become a part of the ministry that God has for you in your workplace and the calling that He has for you there? There are eternities and families that have been transformed because of the work that God has done and been a part of. And sometimes I look at what God's been doing in this church and I'm like, God, I want more. And there's a part of that that's really healthy. But then there's other times I step back and I realize the impact that God has had. We're coming up to this fall where we get to celebrate our 5-year anniversary, and I think by the time we get there, we're going to have baptized 40 people in the 5 years of this church. Those are 40 eternities. Those are 40 families that are changed forever. One of those people, not even alive anymore. There was one shot, one opportunity that we had. And we took it, and God worked through us, and the eternity has changed forever. We would have missed it. But it's the faithfulness of so many over decades that has a huge eternal impact. And this is Jesus saying, would you bring me with you to more places? As you go to your work, as you go to that family lunch, as you see that neighbor that you don't really like but needs a little bit of encouragement right now. I don't know what it is, but He's saying, would you just bring me with you? I want to make a difference. So would you pray with me? And we're just going to invite Jesus. We're going to invite Him in to all of our lives. Decades, not days. Jesus, would you come? Would you help us teach our kids what really matters in life? Would our kids, Jesus, know who you are at an early age? And would they follow you faithfully throughout their life? Jesus, would you help us bring you into our workplaces, into those places and those coworkers and those conversations where I have no idea how I can stand up for what is right, but Jesus, would you do that through me? Would you make an impact? Jesus, would you help us throw off everything that hinders, any sin, any decisions, any habits that are hindering us? Would you help us throw that off so that we can run the race and not be held back by anything? Jesus, would you help us, Lord, in the small decision after small decision, just say, I'm going to follow Jesus, I'm going to trust Him, and I'm going to look at the big picture of the decades, not just the days in my life. Would you help us see through your eyes, God? Would you help us see what is the purpose that I'm called to make? What is the difference I'm called to make, Jesus? We look to you, God. Would you give us purpose and calling, and would you give us the assurance that what we are doing matters in all areas of our life, God? We worship you. Amen. Amen. Would you stand? We're going to worship Him together this morning. We're going to worship Him.